Cuckolding has been a hot topic recently, and I always like to hear opinions from experts who are for or against something. So, today we'll hear more about why a therapist doesn't think cuckolding is such a good idea. Hello, my loves, it's Dr. Tara. Welcome to Love Bites, the podcast for sexual wellness and exploration. Today with us is Josh Hudson, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist who has spent thousands of hours helping men save their marriages. Josh scoured the world learning from the best mentors and masters of behavioral change. He has accumulated the most efficient practices into a modality that helps turn around marriages that are on the brink of divorce. Very interesting. I need to probe more about that. His new modality has been sought out by top experts and news experts to educate on how to save marriages and how to thrive in a modern marriage by helping men become masculine leaders in their relationships. Man, all kinds of keywords. Hi, Josh.
Yeah, how you doing? Well, thank you for welcoming me onto the show.
Yes, I'm really excited. Okay, before we go into cuckolding questions, I want to learn more about your therapy philosophy, like your modality.
Yeah, well, a lot of people listening probably think like, well, how does cuckolding relate to, maybe saving marriages? And I really specialize in helping men quit porn too, and I have extensive experience in the addiction realm, and especially porn addiction. So I've helped thousands of men through that. And my original YouTube channel, Pinnacle Man, has millions of views on quitting porn. So there is a lot of experience there as well with cuckolding. So I just wanted to throw that in. But yeah, what was your main question? Like how I developed my modality?
Yeah, so your modality and your focus is helping men and, quote from the bio, become masculine leaders in their
Yes.
relationships.
Oh,
What
yeah.
does that mean?
Yeah, there's like I hate using this term, like a pandemic or of men that just have become complacent. There's that famous quote that goes around that like strong times create weak men create bad times create strong men. And it's like that cycle. And right now we've had really good times. So now that it's created a lot of weak, complacent men. And a lot of men in these marriages, they are just kind of going along with the status quo. They're kind of being mediocre. They're not striving for more. And it's leading to things like depression and isolation, lack of connection. And yeah, we've been kind of weakened by a lot of these advances in technology and other things. At least that's what I see in the landscape of men today.
Wow, that's such an interesting and very strong word choice. So like what does a weak man look like?
Yeah, so I think that I never really been asked that, but let's define it. I think a guy who doesn't have a purpose in life, right? Who is constantly searching for, I mean, on a neurological level, just dopamine throughout the day, whether just on social media all day, watching TV for hours, eating junk food, always going for something that feels good, right? Instead of pushing himself toward pain and growth, because pain and growth are kind of synonymous up to a degree, right? And so a lot of men are just seeking comfort more than ever. And in this day and age, it's so easy to get it, right? So yeah.
Interesting. So if you lack purpose and you spend all day with distractions,
yeah. And
that's
porn
kind
is
of
an
your
easy outlet of that,
definition.
right? Like porn is like, instead of some of the men's like biggest fears, I worked with a lot of military men, like they can go get shot at, but like the idea of approaching a woman and getting rejected is like more terrifying to them. And so when it comes to actually talking to a woman and courting her and like facing rejection, men rather just click a couple clicks of the a mouse and then thousands of women in front of them, right? And so that's what they rather do.
Do you feel like porn is it like all bad, or do you feel like there's benefits to porn?
Yeah, I don't like to take a stance of bad and good. It's just like, let's look at consequences and actions, right? And porn does activate a lot of the same neural pathways as other drugs do, right? The VTA to nucleus accumbens, and it's like it releases a lot of dopamine. And then when we are done watching porn, like the cortisol increases and the lactin and all these other things. And it's like the consequences are men tend to be less motivated, right? The shame increases a lot because there's a desensitization where they need to watch more and more novel porn, which leads to some dark areas. And then once they watch it, they're like, why am I into that stuff? Right. And they judge themselves. And people tend to isolate more. The more they watch porn, studies will show that they're more socially isolated. So, and they kind of feed off each other, right? Socially isolated people also watch more porn. So those are consequences. And if you don't like those consequences, then maybe it's not a good idea, right? But there are
Right.
millions of men who can watch porn and it doesn't affect them negatively. Just kind of
Right.
like alcohol, right? Like there's people who can drink
Yeah.
alcohol
There's
and
a
they're
lot of
fine. I can
social
have a
drinkers.
whiskey.
Right.
Yeah. And then some people, once a bit alcohol, nope, bye-bye. They're off the deep end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So I'm hearing that like moderation is an important factor in porn viewing, and as well as just like being more aware of yourself. Like,
yeah.
are you going into a negative loop of
Yeah.
lower self-esteem, more isolation, lower self-esteem, more isolation?
Yeah. Do you know Dr. Gabor Mate's work on addiction?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he defines addiction. Don't I think I'm paraphrasing him, but like if you're doing something despite obvious consequences and you're still doing it, and if you're doing it compulsively, right? And so if you're doing something compulsively, like you catch yourself just like watching porn when you were working out of nowhere, or you know that you're like up at 2 a.m. and you have like a test the next morning as a student or like work, and you're tired the next day because you're watching porn for 4 hours at night. That's a consequence, right? You want to
Yeah.
evaluate your life and say, is this
Yeah.
activity causing damage in my life?
Yeah. Well, in that case, it's very problematic, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So now that we kind of learn a little bit more about like your approach and like principles and philosophy, let's talk about cuckolding, because we've seen, my team and I have seen a couple of your videos, and we were really interested in the position that you've taken. And I think that it's a fruitful conversation to have. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So why do you think it's a bad idea?
I think from the research I've had and the hundreds of men who've talked to me about this specific issue, and we really dive deep into why they're into it, there's always a sense of inferiority, right? The idea of watching someone else more capable, because usually that's what it is, more capable, give pleasure to someone that you're emotionally connected to. It generally stems from a place of like them not feeling good enough, and it's creating this like your ego is almost like creating like, yeah, this should be happening. This pain should be happening because I'm not good enough as a person, right? I can't give enough pleasure to the person I'm with. So I have let someone else do that. So it generally stems from a pretty dark place from what I've seen personally, anecdotally from the clients I work with. And, usually if we do something that's just like reevaluate, like poking this wound that we have stemming from trauma somewhere in childhood, it tends to not be a good thing generally. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I would love to hear someone who's pro and to hear their arguments, and because I don't know what the pro arguments are, to be honest.
Uh-huh. I have another episode that will be on the pros. So it's
Okay.
definitely a good
Okay.
month of just exploring the topic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can it just be for fun?
I mean, isn't for some people murdering people is fun. I mean, I know I'm taking an extreme example to prove the point, but like anything could be fun for the person, but doesn't mean it's good. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Like doing heroin could be fun for a lot of people too. Like,
What if the
it,
couple's like, wow, that's like sounds like a fun and exciting idea? Is there a possibility that it comes from a positive space? What do you
I
think?
think I think people are mixing up swinging and like cuckolding, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
swinging, like exchanging partners, and you're like, oh, my person's getting pleasure from someone else, I'm getting pleasure from someone. There's like an equal exchange there, which even I would
Mm.
argue can probably that's a whole other topic because that
Uh-huh.
could be stem from a bad place too. But cuckolding, like the idea that I see and know of it is like you're observing someone more capable than you
Mm-hmm.
pleasure your partner. And I know there's a lot of degrading towards the person, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
people tell me that like in these porn scenes that the guy observing is like being like, say he's like awful and like spit on, like
Yeah.
just like
Or
degrading him. And
like
like,
you're so tiny, like you can't
yeah,
pleasure me. You're a little bitch.
okay, there you go. I mean, so I would love to hear the counter. I mean, you've heard the counter arguments. I mean, I would love to hear them, and then I can see
Uh-huh.
what they are, and I would love to debate those.
Ooh, an interesting concept and practice that has been a little bit more popular recently, or just people have been sharing it more, is a woman cuck. So in a heterosexual relationship, it's like, let's say like I'm the woman and I want to sit and watch my husband fuck another woman.
Hmm.
What do you think about that then? Do the dynamics change now that it's different
I didn't
gender?
even know that existed because I thought
Yeah.
like all cuckold porn was like the man. I
Yeah.
don't watch porn, so but yeah, I didn't know that existed. I mean, I think so. Here, can I just talk my theory here? And this will make
Yeah.
and all right. So my theory, and it's kind of controversial, but I think that the human brain wants to have the ego wants to have control, right? And when trauma happens in our life, it wants to go about recreating similar scenarios, but have control over the trauma. So as an example, pretty much 100% of the men that are into cuckold porn, they were cheated on in an early relationship.
Is this a survey? Is it by?
So these are just the men I've personally worked with, right, over the years, doing this for 10 years. 100% have all been cheated on, right? And so they're recreating the trauma with a person they love, but this time they have control over it, right? And now here's the controversial part, is that a majority of women are really into BDSM, right? And also a lot of women have been sexually abused and assaulted, right? And so going along with this theory, it could be stated that when a woman who's into BDSM or being tied up or, against her will, that she's doing that with someone she trusts because it's almost cathartic for her to do it versus the trauma she had with someone else earlier on, right? So the sexual domain is a way to kind of create a catharsis or a healing around trauma in the sexual kind of like arena. And so when we take that with cuckolding, like these men are trying to like have control over their trauma. But what I found is that if they heal that trauma and they have a different position and a perspective on it, and they kind of let go and forgive the people in the scenario of the trauma, that sexual appetite changes. That's
interesting. So like, let's say in a couple of cases, for the men you've worked with, once they feel more healed from their trauma, what does that sexual appetite change to?
I mean, they generally, the men I work with personally, they kind of stop watching porn in general. I help them quit porn, right? And when they have sex, it's less about objects and fetishes, and it's more about like intimate physical connection, right? They lean towards more just like passionate, intimate, like want eye contact and like love making, if you will. There's still some raw, fucking everything. They're less drawn to like the novelty, right, aspect of porn and sex.
Ooh, okay. So now that you're talking more about porn, I saw your other video about porn addiction. So what's the relationship between holding fantasy and porn addiction?
Yeah, so there's a lot of studies showing that, when a child or a kid, and I say child because a majority of the men that would reach out to me over Instagram or emails, like 12, 13 years old, these kids are struggling with porn. It's like they start young, right? Because it's so
12
easy.
years old.
Yeah, it's pretty sad that these kids are watching it this young and they can't stop watching it. But what happens is that, desensitization occurs, right? They watch, the first naked photo they see of a girl. It's like, oh my God, I'm so aroused. And then it's like, now videos, then multiple tabs, and they got to go darker and darker and darker. And so I see like cuckolding is just like another domain of like something they haven't explored yet. This increase in fetishism, it leads to a lot of shame, right? And that shame just kind of increases the isolation. And when people are isolated, they get more stressed out. And that stress, the way they cope with that stress is going back to porn. And so it's like this vicious cycle that just kind of occurs over and over.
So with, porn, it sounds like there's some people that would, watch porn like once a week or once a month, and maybe like they pop that, up sometimes when they masturbate, or maybe them and their partners want to like try something new, or like try like a certain toy, or watch like fingering techniques. They will like watch porn. Are you someone who's like absolutely no porn, or are you more like no, like if it was educational porn, or like if it's purposeful usage of porn, that's a different scenario, or you think all porn's just bad?
No, I was talking to actually Sterling Cooper about this on a podcast. I don't know if you know who that is. He's like a ex-porn star, yeah. And like the umbrella of porn encompasses like illegal stuff, right? All the dark corners of the web, to
very
like
scary.
Yeah, to like educational. So like when you say the word porn, it encompasses all of that. So of course I don't think and like all of it is quote unquote bad. Like, and I want to go back to the idea that it depends on the consequences, right? Like if it improves your sexual relationship with your partner, go for it. Absolutely do it. Yeah.
How do you feel about pegging?
I have a female friend who wants to find a guy that she can do that with.
Yes.
It's like a running joke in our friend group, and she's like always looking for a guy. And
her first sentence on Tinder is like, "Are you into pegging? Do you want to be pegged?
I mean,
yes or no?"
It's the first thing she asked. No,
screening question.
Seriously, and she's hilarious. Yeah. But that being said, like, I really do believe to each their own. I just say like with everything that you're exploring, like ask yourself where it's coming from and how you feel after it's done. Like a lot of these guys that were into cuckolding, the ones I worked with, like after they watched the porn or after a couple did experiment with role plays of like them acting like a different guy when they were having sex with their partner, they felt horrible after. I had one man, for example, okay. He wanted to role play with his girlfriend about this. And he said, he basically the role play was that like he would leave right out of town for a weekend, and some mechanic would come over to fix her sink or something. And she's like, "Oh, I have a boyfriend," and she was saying his name, right? Like my boyfriend, my boyfriend Derek or whatever. He's not home right now. And then she basically gave in. And what happened? I swear to God, he said that when they were going into it, he was shaking like this, and he was saying it was cold, and it wasn't cold at all. And his body was having a traumatic response. And so for him personally, like exploring down this route, even with a woman he felt safe with, his girlfriend, like the thought of her cheating on him with another man gave him a traumatic response. So you can try it out, like to each their own. But all I'm saying is like, ask yourself how you feel after it's done, or you explore that idea. Like if you feel good about it, great. But if you all of a sudden start to think that you're, now she's going to go do it with other people behind your back, it's probably not a good idea to, you might want to look inward and try to heal where that's coming from.
Now, have you heard of this concept where it's not like traditional cuckolding, but it's like watching your partner have sex with someone else while like you direct them?
Okay, so there's even more control over the trauma that goes
So
along
like
with
you say, okay, now you put your cock in her pussy, or like, okay, now lick her right nipple. Like the cock is directing the scenario. What do you think about that?
Before I answer that question, have you interviewed someone who's into cuckolding on your show? Like
Yeah.
personally? Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'd love to talk to them. But anyways,
I
no,
love a full
yeah,
spectrum of things,
I love
right?
that you like
Yeah, it's
you're trying
so
to get like
fun.
a brushstroke of every perspective on
Yeah.
this thing. Yeah, absolutely. That just kind of like really validates my original opinion, right, about the whole catharsis thing. Like if they have trauma, it's like they're even wanting more control over the trauma, right? Like that makes sense.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're saying like from the trauma of like something you couldn't control and maybe someone hurt you or abused you, and then now like practicing this. So okay, so what if it's healing? Are you saying like there are other ways to heal yourself?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I haven't personally found someone that like, yes, like doing cuckolding with this person I love and trust and having control over it has been healing. There's like a perverse satisfaction because you're like, it's like this almost like this
Yeah. Like a
monster.
gratification almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the ego is saying, I know that she's going to eventually do this anyways, because you're afraid that the trauma is going to occur again. Because when trauma happens to us, we act and believe in a way that it's going to happen again. So it makes us feel safe, right? Like I was cheated on actually in one of my first relationships, right? And so my next relationship, I purposely did things subconsciously, right, to push her away, right? And I think we naturally do this as human beings, right? We just recreate this trauma. And so like when it comes to someone doing that, there might be like this perverse satisfaction, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's coming from a necessarily healthy place, mentally healthy place. And like my philosophy is that as human beings, we are supposed to learn and grow and heal so we can heal others. And I just don't think that's aiding that process.
Interesting. I'm definitely a fan of learning and growing as well. I was in both positions where like I was cheated on before, and then I also cheated on someone before, and I definitely know that it's not a good feeling. It's very dark, it's very hurtful. Um I have another question. So
Of course.
how long have you been married?
Oh, I'm not married yet. I've been with my girlfriend for about 10 months.
Okay. Would you say that after, so there's like research that shows there's sexual humps, like humps of sexual desire for each other because it just becomes boring. There's 5-year hump and 10-year hump that research found like people tend to struggle in terms of
Sure.
passion for each other.
Yeah.
Then my next question would be, let's say if the couple's like, well, we've been hearing about cuckolding, we've seen maybe a video, like a porn video, and we feel like we want to try. What are other practices that people can attempt instead of exploring cuckolding if you feel like cuckolding comes from an unhealthy place?
Esther Perel talks about this a lot, right? with couples.
The pulling and pushing and the energy.
Yeah. And also like the sense of like, okay, you have to just ask yourself, like, what emotional need is being met through that act, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, maybe novelty. Let's just say it's novelty, just for the case of this
Mm-hmm.
argument. If it's novelty, that's some need getting met. Is like, can you have novelty in a different domain, or it can still be in the sexual domain if you want, but can you introduce novelty in another way,
Mm-hmm.
right? That doesn't involve another partner.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm always about like, doing whatever you feel is best for you guys, but
Uh-huh.
as a couple, anyone listening, but at the same time, ask what need is being met, and then ask yourself if you can get that need met in a more healthy way, right?
Mm-hmm.
As an example, like you can kind of get out of your mind a lot by drinking a bunch of alcohol, or you can
Uh-huh.
meditate. Both get you
Uh-huh.
out of your mind, but one has really detrimental effects, right? And another one is more
Mm-hmm.
positive for you. So it's like, when it comes to this need being met, can you get it met in a more healthy way?
Interesting. Okay, now, what would be like, let's say, what would you recommend specifically if someone was like, okay, like I want novelty. Let's say, what are like 3 things that you would say, okay, try these 3 things first.
Yeah. Go somewhere else in the world.
Travel.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So
Like,
let's say they travel and they're like, we still have this edge of like we're not super, the spark isn't there. What's
Mhm.
next?
There is a plethora of role plays you can do, right, that don't
Mm-hmm.
involve other people, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's sex toys you can introduce, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if they've done all of that, again,
Mm-hmm.
like, by all means, kind of tease the idea up a little bit, like try the role
Uh-huh.
like that my client did, where he started to have the trauma response. Like, try it out there, like play it out where it's like you're a different person, she's a different person. How does that feel? If it
Mm-hmm.
feels good for the both of you, you guys kind of check in afterwards. It's like, all right, let's just now hang out with someone else, and we don't have to take it all the way to sex. We can just talk about it with someone else, then kind of check in
Uh-huh.
with each other. It's like, you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
just jump into the deep end all right
Yeah.
away, right? Because you might sink, and then the relationship's gonna fall. And then there's this, like, I've had couples who've done this, right, in session, and like, they're breaking up, like marriages, because they
Uh-huh.
introduced a third person, right,
Uh-huh.
and then an emotional relationship was created with that third person, even though they said they had boundaries around it, because they just jumped in, right? They didn't
Mm-hmm.
explore it slowly. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying, if you're going to do it, go for it, but just take it one step at a time, like, because it can
Mm-hmm.
jeopardize the whole entire relationship, where if a betrayal happens, that can cause damage on the whole relationship, and then it's all
Mm-hmm.
gone because you wanted to explore this ephemeral need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a good point. It is one step at a time. I'm definitely a fan of that. And I think it's definitely a mistake when people just like randomly and haphazardly have like a threesome. And I'm like, well, if it turns out well for you and you had fun and you don't get attached to this other person, great. But what if it does go the other way because you did it haphazardly, and now your relationship that you've built like this trust and love for the last like 5 years is now in jeopardy because of that one drunken haphazard night. So I definitely feel you on that. Um, Now, my last question would be, if you were to, you know, okay, let me go back. Let's say I'm 30 years old and I'm a 30-year-old man and I'm here talking to you about all kinds of like kinky things that I'm into. Um, and that my girlfriend is like, oh, absolutely not. Like, my girlfriend is like super vanilla. What would be your advice for this 30-year-old man? Brian, I'm Brian.
Brian, you should have checked that in the beginning, man. It's your fault.
Okay,
I,
expand on that.
I was being sarcastic. I mean,
Oh.
it's because I didn't want to make him feel bad. But I mean, for a guy who is men who are single, it's like, yeah, you gotta like put those, not boundaries up, I guess you call them boundaries, right? But you gotta say
Mm-hmm.
what you want early on in the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it so many times, unfortunately, with so many married guys who are, in their 50s, and it's like, they are like, sex with their wife is like not. And I was like, it's never been that way. She's like, no, she's always been like, it's just never been compatible. I'm like, man, how did you have 3 kids with this woman and like spend 20 years with her? I get that it does happen. And so I would tell Brian, I'd be like, well, Brian, do you think it's a skill deficit or a motivational deficit with her? Is it because she can't do it or she doesn't want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe people can change their behavior,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, are you kind of like thinking it's just who she is, so you kind of give up? Because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
men, the way they try to change women is they use a kind of a masculine approach, and they're like, they challenge her, right? Instead of like supporting her and appreciating her and say like, I love that you do this. Oh my God, you're so sexy when you moan, or when you like that time, and then you like said that different voice. It's like, oh, that turned me on. Like, they don't
positive
reinforce
reinforcement. Yeah.
Men, we like to challenge. We like to make each other change by challenge, and we use that same framework with women, and it just makes women feel like that. Like, if you want to get a girl to go to the gym, tell her that she looks sexy when she's sweating, right? And it's like, instead of like, oh, you got a little bit of like a little fat going on over there, and she's like, fuck you, like, right?
Yeah.
So I would tell
Brian, that's a really good point. I never thought about that. How men challenge each other, and it's okay, but in a relationship, that's very negative
for a woman. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I would say, like, what's your strategy to trying to get her to do this? And I kind of analyze that with him. Like, what have you tried so far? And I guarantee most men don't know how to like help their wife. Okay, look, relationships are simultaneously the easiest and hardest things in the world, because they're so easy, because it's all about just like meeting their needs and they're meeting your needs. The difficulty comes up with like all the emotions and not people understanding themselves and how to like directly express their needs, fear of rejection, all those things involved. So it's like, I would ask Brian, like, what have you tried so far? And have you been direct? Have you been honest? Have you tried reinforcing her? So I think the strategy's probably off. I think people are capable of, changing. Right.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, well, the last segment of my show is called 5 Quickies with Dr. Tara. And what that is I'm going to give you a word, and you just give me a quick response back.
Okay.
A quickie. Are you a fan of a quickie?
No.
No, you're a fan of like Tantra, 2 hour.
I would say somewhere in between. I mean, look, I'm not like strictly all one way or another, but like, I like enjoying it when I'm there.
Yes. Okay. So number 1, sex parties.
All for it.
Number 2, favorite sex toy.
The wand.
Number 3, erectile dysfunction.
Porn induced.
Number 4, your favorite sex position.
Doggy.
Woof woof. I mean, followers know this. It's my favorite as well. Number 5, number 1 key to having better sex.
Communication. Yeah.
Thank you. As a sexual communication professor in college, I'm like, y'all, listen, all the experts around the world has been validating my job since day one. Like, everyone's like, communication. Like, you want to try this? Communication. You want to try that? Communication. So
number 2 would be polarity, I think, though.
Yeah. Like, I've been listening to different polarity speakers for a while now, because it is not like taught in, like my PhD program. They don't teach polarity, but it is a very interesting concept. And before we end this talk, how about you talk about it a little bit?
Yeah. So the people who don't know the concept of polarity, it's I first heard about it with David Data, his book With the Way of the Superior Man. He takes it from like Eastern philosophy, I think like Hinduism and like ancient, I'm not sure if it's much in like China as well, but just the idea that there's like masculine and feminine polarity, and there are different poles of the magnet, yin and yang. And it doesn't mean men are all masculine, women are all feminine. You can have like, I have feminine traits myself, right? I'm more people focused, where masculine's more things focused. I'm more people focused, right? I'm a therapist, right? So, and then you have shades of everything. But the idea is, if you think of a spectrum of like, let's say 10 out of 10 is full feminine, 0 out of 10 is full masculine. Different parts of the spectrum will align with each other, right? Like this, right? Like a 2 and a 7, or 3 and a 7, 5 and a 5. And that a lot of men, going back, like making this full circle, a lot of men have become feminized, right? Because a lot of them just had raised by single moms. The father wasn't around. In the school system, there's a lot of like feminine teaching, like rites and rituals and passages of men have, like, there's no more of that for men, like these brotherhoods to like make them into men. And so what happens is, like, we get a lot of nice guys, right? And they're very feminized. And in the sexual domain, it's like, I cringe thinking this, but like,
is it bad to be nice?
Well, how do we define niceness?
Well, it depends, right? Because you were like, there are a lot of nice guys. I feel like nice guys are awesome.
Yeah,
we define it differently.
I think we're arguing over semantics here, because when I'm talking about nice, I'm talking about the guy who is like very indirect what he wants, and like, instead of like let's talk about sex, like in the sexual domain. Hey, do you want me to go down on you? Like, like
wishy-washy.
Can I kiss you? Or like, and just him like not like being dominant, right? Like, this is what I want. I'm gonna go for it. And if you could say no, right? We have consent, but like, I'm still gonna go after what I want. And that's sexy, right? And a lot of men are just like people pleasers. That's what I say nice, right? They bend over backwards, they walk in eggshells, they use covert contracts, which is like the idea, if I do this for her and I don't tell her, I expect her to do this for me, right? And so they're entitled to things.
Covert contracts.
Nice. Yeah. It's from the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. Donald Glover talks about it. Yeah.
What's covert contracts?
Yeah. So it's this idea, and a lot of men that I work with, the married men, they suffer from this a lot. They're thinking to themselves, because I bring home the money, because I take care of the kids, because I clean the house that day and I take her out and I made dinner, she should have sex with me tonight. I'm not going to tell her. And then when she doesn't have sex with me, I'm going to get upset and I'm not going to tell her why. It's a contract, an indirect contract they make with their wife about needs without telling them, right? So it's, if I do this, you should do that. And nice guys do it all the time because they're afraid,
that becomes so transactional.
100%, very tit for tat, right? And it just creates this like resentment between you and your partner. And yeah, that's like a huge issue that a lot of men that I work with have.
Very interesting. Okay, well, where can my listeners find you?
Yeah. So my YouTube channel for helping men in their marriage is Marriage Mastery with Josh Hudson. Relationship Mastery with Josh Hudson, my bad. Relationship Mastery. And then for Quitting Porn, the YouTube channel is Pinnacle of Man. So I have 2 channels there, yeah.
Okay, awesome. We'll have those links in today's show notes.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Josh. This is such an interesting conversation, and I really enjoy like listening to your perspective. As a therapist, like, do you see a lot of clients weekly?
So, I mean,
are you trying to shift over to like content creator?
Well, I do the content creation, but I have coaches under me. I do have private clients, but I have like a lot of coaches under me that we serve. And I do like a lot of group work too. So, but I do see a couple clients who do want to pay my fee.
Yeah. Well, so listeners, if you're interested, definitely I'll have links to Josh's channels in the show notes so you can contact Josh. Thank you so much. And my Love Bites fam, thank you for listening till the end of the episode. Definitely, if you love this episode, share it with your friends, neighbors, brothers, sister, parents, whoever they are. Share it on your Instagram, TikTok, tag me. I love hearing from you. Other than that, have an orgasmic day.